clues to the violent end of the Bismarck, and the fateful decisions that led her here lie in the mangled wreckage far below the surface.
At nearly 3 miles below the surface, an AI-powered drone began its thermal scan of the legendary Bismarck wreck. What started as an exciting exploration soon turned into something far darker. The scanners picked up heat traces where none should exist, inside a ship that had been lost for nearly 50 years. As the drone drifted closer, the temperature spiked for a brief moment, as if something alive had stirred within the wreck. What came next has haunted many of those who saw it in their sleep. Join us as we unravel the mysteries of the Bismarck wreck, the adventures of the German giant. The crew on the research vessel Odysseus was tasked with sending an artificial intelligence drone into the deep to scan the wreck of the Bismarck. For years, the ship had rested far below, lost in darkness and untouched by time. But what they planned to do would reach into history itself. The Bismarck had once ruled the ocean. Built by Germany during World War II, it was one of the most powerful battleships ever made. Its armor was thick, its guns could destroy targets miles away, and its speed shocked the British Navy. But that pride did not last long. In May 1941, after days of fierce battle, British ships surrounded and destroyed it. Flames tore through the decks, explosions broke its frame, and within minutes, it began to sink. More than 2,000 sailors went down with the vessel. Only a small number survived. For decades, the Bismarck lay in silence, hidden under cold layers of the Atlantic. That was until 1989, when ocean explorer Robert Ballard finally found it. The giant warship was sitting upright, its turrets still facing forward, its hull cracked but still proud. Since then, scientists had visited the site many times, but large parts of the ship stayed out of reach. Collapsed decks and twisted steel sealed off whole sections. Human divers could never go that deep safely, but technology had changed. And this time, they had something new, built to see what eyes could not. The AI-powered underwater drone wasn't like the older submersibles. This one could think, move, and decide its path. It carried sensors that detected temperature changes, using thermal vision to find small differences in the wreck's metal. It could move through tight spaces and map the inside in full detail. The mission was meant to test how artificial intelligence could explore deep-sea sites with precision and caution. Still, no one on the ship felt relaxed about what they might find. Before launch, the team gathered around a digital map on the control table. The commander pointed at the coordinates, the site where the Bismarck had sunk. The depth was over 3,000 meters, where pressure could crush steel and light could never reach. He stated the mission clearly, to go down there and bring back truth. The AI engineer adjusted the controls, and the drone's systems hummed. It was ready. The cradle on the side of Odysseus lowered the drone into the sea. Water splashed over its metal shell, and the surface swallowed it slowly. The signal stayed strong. On the screens inside, the feed showed nothing but deep blue at first, then black as it moved further down. The descent felt endless. Every meter below added weight, danger, and tension. The temperature dropped fast. After half an hour, the sonar started to catch something massive. The Bismarck was near. Out of the dark came the shape of the wreck. It rose like a mountain of steel, resting in silence. The drone slowed its movement. The crew leaned closer to their monitors. There it was, the ship that once terrified the Atlantic. Barnacles covered its surface, and long shadows crawled across its broken decks. Pieces of the hull had fallen away, leaving gaping holes where guns and control towers once stood. The drone hovered, then circled slowly, scanning every inch. The ship was more than wreckage. It was a tomb. As the system mapped the outer frame, it began to detect faint variations in temperature. Even after 8 decades underwater, the metal still released small traces of heat from corrosion and trapped gases. The sensors painted the data into glowing thermal maps. The drone's lights caught a fragment of a steel plate with German markings still visible. Thousands had lost their lives here. This vessel was once alive with sound, orders, and fear. Now it was still, but somehow not fully gone. The drone moved toward the stern, gliding past open corridors and collapsed beams. Inside, the darkness thickened. The thermal scan began to draw strange outlines, sections that seemed slightly warmer than the rest. The engineer explained it was likely from decaying chemicals or slow reactions between metal layers, but the shapes looked uneven, almost organic. The archaeologist among them frowned and told them to take another pass. After several hours, the drone completed its first outer mapping run. The AI drone transmitted data to the ship, millions of readings that would later rebuild the full structure in 3D. But before pulling the machine back, the commander gave one last order. He wanted it to take a closer look at the inner compartments, the ones that no diver had ever entered. The AI responded instantly and turned toward a hole in the deck. As it entered the ship, narrow corridors appeared, covered in mud and coral growth. The thermal screen showed tiny flickers of warmth deep inside, like ghostly signals trapped in iron. The engineer adjusted focus and tried to explain it as natural, but the shapes remained fixed, clustered in places where men once worked and slept. Then the commander finally called it back. The drone reversed, climbed slowly the same way it came. That night, the data log showed something none of them could explain, but that was only the beginning. Scanning the deep. The next attempt was sharper in purpose than before. The team on Odysseus held their breath as sensors flicked on. The drone entered the abyss, guided by algorithms, sonar pulses, and thermal senses. It was no longer just a machine, it was a probe of the unknown. The drone's core was built with autonomy in mind. Its onboard AI had been trained on hundreds of wreck datasets, capable of recognizing structural patterns, anomalies, even signs of heat. It carried sonic imaging, LiDAR, inertial navigation, and thermal arrays all working together. If one sensor failed, others would adjust. Onboard chips interpreted data in real time, deciding how to turn, where to scan next, and what to skip. They programmed the mission path as a grid, overlapping passes over every inch of the wreck's outer hull, then inward runs through corridors. The path was flexible. The drone could deviate when heat anomalies showed. It had rules: avoid sharp metal edges, don't push into unknown voids without checks, always record extra buffer around odd readings. The engineers trusted the machine to carry its load. As the drone moved closer to the wreck, its sonar painted coarse maps of the surroundings. Every ridge, drop, and chunk of debris came into view. The AI merged sonar with thermal data. For each surface patch, it measured minute temperature gradients. Even in freezing water, differences of a few tenths of a degree mattered. The thermal arrays picked up subtle heat from corrosion, trapped air pockets, chemical reactions inside steel. That was the secret. In the dark, warmth was the language. Inside the wreck's shell, things changed. Some compartments were sealed, others were crushed. The AI sketched geometry from sparse returns, filling gaps with prediction algorithms. In dark corridors, no light could reach, but heat could travel through metal. The thermal sensors traced pathways, from engine rooms to crew quarters, control towers to storage holds. The overlay made the ghost of the ship's structure glow faintly on screens. The team watched lines build into rooms, heat maps layering over concrete and steel forms. They saw zones where corrosion was active, rust eating insides. They saw chambers that had cooled down over decades, now nearly uniform with surrounding water. But they also saw odd patterns, warm streaks cutting across cold metal, spots isolated and brighter. The AI flagged those automatically as anomalies needing further scans. The AI then shifted strategy. It paused its preset path and zoomed deeper into flagged zones. It slowed down, sweeping more detailed scans in small arcs. It replayed small thermal swipes, overlapping passes, refining resolution. The warm spots sharpened, showing faint shapes, elongated contours, layered heat zones, uneven geometry. The system labeled them clusters, possible voids, heat contrast zones. Engineers cross-checked calibration to ensure it wasn't faulty. The AI recalibrated mid-mission on its own, adjusting thermal baselines as depth and pressure noise changed. The control team watched raw data and refined maps side by side. The anomalies held firm. They did not smear or disappear through recalibration, they persisted. That implied they were real, not artifacts. The drone plucked a small path into a restricted deck. It slipped through ruptured hull plates, entering a low passage. The corridor was narrow, debris hung overhead. Sonar showed collapsed beams, The AI scanned side walls, corners, and floors, capturing high-resolution thermal fields. In this dark vein, the warm patches clustered close to junctions, pipes, bulkhead seams, ventilation ducts. It was as if heat had leaked along old channels. On screen, a three-dimensional thermal map emerged. It looked like a glowing skeleton over cold stone. Rooms showed gentle thermal gradients. Some walls glowed faintly, others were dark. The AI marked zones with color shifts: amber, red, gold. Even in cold metal, the imagery looked alive. The archaeologist, watching, couldn't help but marvel at the details of the findings. The drone paused in a command room shell. The thermal map lit up lines across consoles and wiring runs. Some sections glowed brighter, indicating circuits, insulation, wiring bundles. The system overlaid structural maps and found alignment. The warm paths followed expected pipe and cable runs. But there were deviations, heat outside planned lines, paths cutting through steel. The team debated if those were stray chemical reactions or something else. Then the drone turned and retraced into storage decks. There, it found warmer blobs in an otherwise dark zone. The shapes were odd, clusters with fuzzy edges, not strictly linear. Some shapes repeated across decks, aligned vertically. The AI tried to connect them, a stack of points through the hull. It labeled them vertical anomaly column. The team's hearts raced. That shape spanned multiple floors, as if something passed through. Then came the strangest reading, a warm patch that moved slightly. In 2 successive scans, the shape shifted a few centimeters. The AI calculated trajectories and flagged it. Slight motion detected. At that point, everyone froze. The system ran a rapid rescan. The moving blob held position again just offset. The system marked it transient thermal event, and somehow, that felt like a relief. The drone lingered near the hull breach. It panned the thermal camera outward. Water outside was nearly uniform cold. Inside, that moving patch stood out. It repeated the scan. The anomaly stayed. It looked like something inside the metal gut of the ship was changing, heating and cooling, shifting. Nothing plausible came to mind. No known reaction explained small motion in metal at those depths. However, the drone obeyed the rule: collect maximum data, but avoid danger. It widened the scan, capturing full 360 degrees thermal sweeps. It linked sonar, thermal, inertial to cross-check. It archived raw frames, compressed maps, and flagged metadata. The shipboard team awaited downloads anxiously. The patterns overlaid anomalies with structural blueprints. The anomalies lay exactly in rooms where crew quarters, corridors, command paths had existed. The drone backed away carefully, avoiding collisions. It retraced the mapping grid outward, leaving the interior zone intact. It began ascent while continuously scanning. On the way up, it ran diagnostic rechecks. All sensors held. The mission recorded perfect logs. No errors, just data. Back aboard Odysseus, they pored over the data. The AI rendered images, 3-dimensional glowing shapes inside the hull. While the crew sat late, eyes fixed on screens, the AI's work had peeled back centuries. Yet inside those patterns lay mysteries: warmth in dead metal, movement in stillness. The team grew cold with realization. The AI had found something more than corrosion. It had found something anomalous, possibly beyond known science. The mission had changed, from exploration to confrontation with the unknown. And that was the power of AI in the deep: to see beyond sight, to map what was hidden, and to challenge belief itself, face to face with the unknown. As the team went through the data, the tension in the control room shifted. They were not just explorers of a shipwreck anymore. They were crossing into mystery. They began by reviewing the historical blueprint of the ship. Sheets laid out by German naval engineers detailed the locations of the command room, the officer quarters, the engine rooms, the crew bunks. The team pulled up the schematics on the main screen and overlaid the thermal maps generated by the AI drone. One by one, the glowing blobs matched rooms where men had once lived. The correspondence was too precise to be coincidence. The researchers exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected to map corrosion or to record decay. They had not expected outlines of human shapes aligned with historic layouts. The Bismarck had carried over 2,000 men when she sank, and over 2,000 never returned. The idea that heat signatures would line up with their quarters haunted the room. Some of the engineers tried to explain the phenomena in physical terms. They considered rust reactions, trapped gases, chemical oxidation of metal under pressure. They cited studies that deep-sea wrecks release heat as metal corrodes and water enters sealed compartments. But the patterns here were too structured. They formed corridors, vertical columns through decks, human-proportioned outlines. Something else seemed to be at work. When Robert Ballard found the Bismarck in 1989, he noted that the hull was in surprisingly good condition. The ship sat upright, embedded in mud, and had not collapsed inward despite the massive pressure at nearly 4,800 meters depth. This indicated that the compartments had flooded fully before impact, supporting the theory that the ship balanced long enough for internal flooding to equalize pressure. That level of preservation meant the internal structure was still largely intact. Hence, the interior spaces still held the architecture of life. However, one of them suggested a theory. Perhaps the heat signatures were faint traces of life, residual biological or microbial activity continuing in sealed-off zones. Deep-sea environments host extremophile microbes that exploit tiny temperature and chemical gradients. Perhaps they had clustered along old cabins and corridors, but the drone's readings were concentrated in rooms where people worked, slept, and commanded the ship. They formed lines where no high-heat chemical reaction should persist. Another theory: trapped air or steam pockets deep in the wreck might still be releasing heat. The interior of the Bismarck was still a sealed container, filled with arms, equipment, wiring, insulation, pipes. Some of these items might be decaying, generating low-level heat over decades. In the French-American expeditions to the wreck, there were no penetrations deep into the armored citadel. That meant many compartments remained undisturbed, sealed from the sea for years. If those spaces held pockets of air, they might still hold heat differential. The team also revisited survivor accounts from May 1941, when the final battle raged. The Bismarck had been hit by numerous shells and torpedoes, its rudder jammed, engines disabled, power lost, flooding rampant. As it sank, the crew fought to abandon ship, to fire scuttling charges, to save the honor of the vessel. The human dimension reframed how the wreck might behave now. Not as a cold object, but as a sealed artifact holding remains of lives lost to the war. Meanwhile, the science team pressed deeper into ambiguous territory. Could it be that they seeing an unknown physical process so far beyond current knowledge? The discussion grew late into the night. Some of them argued for caution. They did not want to fall into speculation. They reminded themselves of correlation versus causation. They checked historical archives, ship's logs, battle reports, and construction plans. The floating thought in the room: whatever this was, it defied easy explanation. As the crew members retired for the night, they prepared for the next dive, the next scan, but they all knew the tone had changed. The wreck was no longer just a subject of archaeology. It had become a site of confrontation. They pulled the drone data back to the ship's servers, locked it under encryption. They scheduled internal meetings for hypothesis formation, for peer review. They debated whether to share the anomalies publicly or control information until validation. The expedition was turning from exploration to inquiry. The Bismarck's legacy, once confined to textbooks, battles, and war graves, now offered something stranger. The ship had been a symbol of war, then a myth, then a wreck. Now it showed signs of persistence. Whether natural, chemical, or something else entirely, the theory challenged everything the team knew. 3 miles under the ocean, the researchers understood one thing: the past doesn't always stay past. Sometimes it continues to live in unexpected ways. The hunt and the wreck. The North Atlantic was gray, cold, and merciless in 1941, ruled by fear and steel. The German battleship Bismarck, massive and menacing, slipped away from her anchorage on a mission that would shake the balance of naval power. She was built to dominate the sea, armored like a fortress and armed with guns that could tear a ship apart in a single hit. Alongside the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen, she entered a secret plan to hunt and destroy British supply convoys, her goal to cut Britain off from the food, fuel, and weapons it needed to survive the war. The British Admiralty soon discovered that Bismarck had been set loose on the open sea, and panic followed. Britain was an island that depended on the sea. Losing control of the Atlantic meant slow starvation. Orders spread through the fleet like wildfire. Every available ship, submarine, and aircraft carrier was to hunt down the German battleship before it reached the convoy lanes. British sailors knew what was at stake. Somewhere in those freezing waves sailed a ship so powerful it could change the war. Then, disaster struck. On May 24, near the Denmark Strait, Bismarck encountered two British warships, HMS Hood and HMS Prince of Wales. Within minutes, shells thundered across the water. The Hood, pride of the Royal Navy, was hit. Her magazines exploded with a flash that tore her in half. More than 1,400 sailors lost their lives in less than 3 minutes. The line was drawn, and the British vowed revenge. The order went out to sink the Bismarck at all costs. For 2 tense days, the Royal Navy chased the German battleship through rain, fog, and storms. British cruisers shadowed her using radar, sometimes losing contact in the storm, then finding her again as she left behind an oily trail from punctured fuel tanks. The hunt stretched across hundreds of miles of ocean. In London, the war room tracked the movements on giant wall maps. Every heartbeat of the chase added pressure. Every report pulled the noose tighter. On May 26th, the British carrier Ark Royal launched a squadron of Swordfish torpedo bombers. They were slow, open-cockpit biplanes facing one of the most advanced warships in existence. In heavy wind, they skimmed just above the waves, their engines rattling in the storm. The first wave failed as the torpedoes missed or malfunctioned, but the second wave pressed on through anti-aircraft fire and chaos. Finally, one torpedo found the target. It struck the stern, jamming Bismarck's rudders and locking the ship into a slow, helpless turn. She could no longer steer, and the enemy fleet was closing in. All through the night, Bismarck tried to escape by steering with her propellers, but the sea refused to show mercy. By dawn on May 27th, the horizon filled with British ships. The battleships King George V and Rodney moved in, followed by cruisers and destroyers. Then guns opened fire. Massive shells screamed through the air, crashing into the German ship. Flames swept across her deck. Her guns answered at first, but every minute her aim grew weaker. One by one, her turrets fell silent as the barrage tore through her hull. The battle raged for almost 2 hours. The once invincible warship was reduced to a burning wreck. Her upper decks were gone, her masts shattered, and her men fought to keep her afloat as water poured in from every side. The British destroyer Dorsetshire moved in to deliver the final blow. Torpedoes struck her side, and the great ship began to roll. Within minutes, the sea swallowed the Bismarck whole. The chase that had gripped the world was over. The Atlantic grew still again, but the cost was staggering. Out of more than 2,000 crewmen, only about 100 survived. The rest sank with the ship into the depths, their bodies carried away by the current. The British sailors who rescued the survivors watched the wreck slip beneath the waves and knew they had witnessed the end of an empire's dream. The Bismarck had been built to prove German naval supremacy, but her fall proved something else entirely, that no machine, no matter how strong, could outlast determination and teamwork on the open sea. News of the sinking spread quickly. Across Britain, crowds gathered to cheer the victory. The destruction of Bismarck was seen as justice for the loss of Hood and a sign that the tide of war might turn. Yet even in triumph, there was an issue. The Royal Navy had thrown nearly everything it had at one ship, and it had taken 5 days to bring her down. It was a brutal reminder that modern warfare was changing fast. Aircraft and torpedoes now ruled the oceans more than heavy guns and armor ever could. As the ocean closed over the wreck, no one imagined it would rest there, untouched, for almost 50 years. The Bismarck lay deep in the dark, far below human reach, preserved by the cold and pressure of the abyss. Her story became legend, a mix of fear, respect, and curiosity. It would take new generations of explorers and machines to find her again, to reveal how she really fell, and to learn what the sea had done to her. Decades later, technology would rise to uncover the ghost of the ship that once terrified an ocean, the rediscovery of the Bismarck. For almost 50 years, the Bismarck lay in darkness, unreached by light or sound. The Atlantic had swallowed her whole, sealing her beneath nearly 3 miles of water. Above, the world moved on. Nations rebuilt, technology advanced, and generations came and went. But the legend of the Bismarck refused to fade. Sailors, historians, and explorers all wondered what had become of the great battleship, and their answers waited far below, hidden in a place where no diver could ever reach. In 1989, American oceanographer Robert Ballard, the man who had discovered the wreck of the Titanic just 4 years earlier, turned his attention to the Bismarck. He was fascinated by the mystery that surrounded her last moments. Historical records were clear about the battle, but no one knew exactly how she had sunk. Some believed that British shells sent her down. Others argued that her own crew scuttled the ship to prevent capture. Ballard wanted proof, and the only way to find it was to go where no human had ever been before, the bottom of the Atlantic abyss. Ballard's expedition began with research, poring over naval charts and wartime reports to trace the Bismarck's final path. He and his team estimated the point of sinking using survivor testimonies and last radio coordinates. They then deployed sonar scanners and robotic submersibles capable of mapping vast areas of seabed. For days they searched in near-total darkness, guided only by sound waves bouncing off the ocean floor. The search area was massive, covering thousands of square kilometers, and every ping from the sonar brought a surge of hope. Then, after long nights and endless sweeps, they found it. The echo that returned from the deep revealed a shape too large and too precise to be natural. When the camera-equipped submersible descended, it sent back haunting images. Out of the darkness emerged the outline of the Bismarck, sitting upright and largely intact. Her massive hull was surrounded by twisted debris and scattered pieces of her superstructure. The guns were still in place. Her bow pointed east, as if still facing her enemy. Even after half a century, she looked powerful. The team realized that the ship had struck the seabed with incredible force but had not disintegrated. The armor belt and hull plating were largely undamaged below the waterline. The ship's main body had survived the descent almost whole, and only the upper section showed heavy destruction. The evidence suggested that the British shell fire had not penetrated deep enough to cause a catastrophic break. The lower hull remained sealed, meaning the scuttling charges set by the German crew may have been what truly sent her under. The discovery was more than a technical triumph. The Bismarck was not just a machine of war, but the resting place of over 2,000 men. The wreck rested silently in the dark, preserved by cold and pressure. Around her lay debris fields of steel and shattered guns, each piece a trace of the chaos that had unfolded above decades earlier. Ballard's team treated the site with respect. The Bismarck, they agreed, would remain undisturbed as a war grave. The images captured during that expedition sparked global fascination. Documentaries and reports carried the visuals to millions of homes. For the first time, people could see the ship that had dominated wartime headlines. The discovery reignited debate about her final hours, with experts analyzing every frame of footage. Some argued that the British fire had been sufficient to sink her. Others insisted that the Germans had deliberately scuttled her. But one fact was clear. The Bismarck had endured both the fury of battle and the crushing pressure of the deep. Years later, new technology brought fresh eyes to the wreck. In 2001, deep-sea explorers returned to the site with advanced submersibles and high-definition cameras. They conducted detailed mapping, capturing every angle and contour of the wreck. The decks were bent, the stern section torn away, and the turrets scattered nearby. The hull, however, remained remarkably strong, a testament to German engineering even after decades under immense pressure. In 2002, filmmaker James Cameron led another expedition to the wreck, using submersibles that could enter parts of the interior. His team captured new images of the inner compartments, showing twisted corridors, rusted ladders, and remnants of machinery frozen in time. The resulting documentary brought viewers closer to the Bismarck than ever before. Watching those scenes felt like stepping back into history, following the last footprints of the crew who had gone down with their ship. As the years passed, each expedition added new layers to the story. Her discovery deepened our understanding of naval warfare and advanced deep-sea exploration technology. Today, the Bismarck rests where she fell, more than 4,000 meters below the surface. Her guns no longer fire, her engines no longer roar, but her presence remains powerful. Her journey tells of courage, loss, and the eternal pull of mystery that draws humanity to seek the past, no matter how deep it lies. Do you think the ship was sunk by the German themselves? Let us know your views in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to this channel. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.